Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Senior Living Today. With us today is Stacia Kerlin-Welch from JP Morgan Wealth Management. Stacia, thank you so much for joining us today. And for our listeners, I would like to give the disclaimer that the discussion we are having today is for informational purposes only. The speaker's opinions belong to them and may differ from the opinions of JP Morgan Securities LLC and its affiliates. This is not an investment research call, and it is not a personal investment advice or solicitation or recommendation. Investment products are not bank deposit products, which means they are not guaranteed by a bank, not FDIC insured, and have risks like the possibility of losing money on your investment. So Stacia, since this is your first time on our podcast, would you mind telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself and what you do with JP Morgan Wealth Management?
Yeah, of course. And thank you for inviting me. I am a private client advisor with JP Morgan Wealth Management based out of Oakwood, Ohio. As an advisor, I help people. I help them plan and work towards goals. I have been an advisor since 2007. Which means I was an advisor in 2008 during the great financial crisis.
So Stacia, when a client comes to you to discuss financial planning for their future and retirement, where do you usually start that conversation?
So my initial meetings, they usually focus on learning about the client, understanding what's important to them. I also spend time educating them on the importance of having a plan. We discuss their specific goals, their timeline for those goals, and their personal risk tolerance. These are all crucial factors to consider when creating a long-term plan. I often tell clients, you can't control the weather. It is going to rain sometimes, but you can control whether or not you're carrying an umbrella.
So you mentioned the word plan. When should people begin planning for their retirement? Is there a specific age that you recommend?
When it comes to retirement planning, the sooner the better. Even before retirement, people are going to face different life events. You may want to plan for a big vacation, buy a home, start a family, or save for future education costs. You can create a plan that helps you work towards these various goals while also planning for your long-term investment future.
So it sounds like setting goals is a very important part of the process for planning for your retirement and your future. So how does that process work? How do you usually walk clients through that as far as setting goals and what that looks like for them?
For many people, this can seem overwhelming initially, but that's where an advisor can help. An advisor can sit down with you and discuss where you see yourself in the near term and in the long-term future. And they can work with you to create a personalized roadmap to help you work towards your specific goals. It's important to remember that planning is not static. It's an ongoing process. It should have the flexibility to be modified as your life or priorities change over time.
So definitely then having those goals in mind, setting them, but being willing to kind of change as things in your life change and adjusting them and working with your financial planner to do that. So personally, I know that I started setting goals for myself back in college, and it's always been a part of my life as I settled into my professional career. So I wanted to dive a little deeper into the goals that people set and how they can use them for their financial planning.
Everyone's financial situation is different. It's important to understand what exactly you are planning and investing towards. Outlining your goals and a timeline for each of them is a really important step in creating a plan. So let's use the example of buying a car. If you want to purchase that car, you need to know how much it will cost. You need to determine when you want to buy that car, and you need to create a plan for contributing towards that goal. And then finally, you need to allocate that money appropriately. Very often people are working towards several different goals at the same time. Having a plan that factors all of your various goals can help you stay on track.
So on the subject of goals, do your clients or do you ever have situations where they maybe set unrealistic goals? And if they do, how do you kind of help guide them through and walk them through those situations?
So yeah, that's pretty common. In this situation, I would sit down with my client to review their existing plan and help them prioritize and choose what's most important to them. Here's an example. So if a client is in their 30s or their 40s and they want to retire at 55 and travel extensively, we should talk about how they plan to pay for private health care since they're going to be retiring before they're eligible for Medicare benefits, how they plan to generate income outside of their retirement assets since they would be under the age of 59 and a half and could potentially face penalties for withdrawing from retirement accounts, and then whether or not they have enough to sustain their lifestyle throughout retirement. And if not, what adjustments can they make now to help get there?
And I think that's why it's so important to engage a financial planner in these situations, because there are probably a lot of things that come up that your clients don't think about when they're setting these goals. So I think that's great. So when this happens, do you usually sit with them and make new goals or alter their existing goals, or how does that process work?
In many cases, we can modify the goal after reprioritizing. If you think about my previous example, the client who wanted to retire at 55 to travel, after reviewing how viable that goal was, the client might choose to work a little longer or travel less.
So once we've put manageable goals in place and have set those, where would someone's regular monthly budget fit into the conversation in terms of long-term planning for retirement?
So in my experience, people often equate the word budget as a negative. I tell my clients to think of it as awareness. If you're aware of how your money is being allocated every month, then you can identify how much you can put towards your long-term goals, like retirement.
So kind of looking at that budget as more of an asset than a limitation, and helping you plan when you make those decisions.
Exactly.
So let's fast forward to an older age, and let's say that your client is now considering to move to a retirement community or a senior living community. What are the first steps that they need to consider?
Moving to a continuing care community is an important goal to plan for, and the planning should start many years in advance. It's important that you do your research and understand exactly what you want. Some of the questions to consider are, how active do you want to be? What are the amenities you want? Are you going to move out of state? Are there upfront costs? Is there a waiting list? This is certainly not the entire list, but, just a sample of considerations.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up, because these are the conversations that we have with, potential prospects looking to move into our communities all the time, that you should really start early, because there is so much research and planning that really does need to go into the process. So let's say that your client has made the decision that they're definitely going to move to a retirement community. What are the next steps for them?
We talk about how they can allocate their resources to that goal. It really goes back to having a plan and developing that strategy in advance for the transition.
So once your client has moved in, do they still usually see you for regular financial advice, or what does that process look like once they've actually moved into the community?
Everyone's financial situation is different, but that said, planning is important even after somebody has moved into a continuing care community. I work with clients to monitor the withdrawal of their assets during retirement. And if we haven't already, we talk about the legacy they want to leave behind.
So Stacia, is there anything that we've forgotten in this process, or anything else that you would like our listeners to know?
I would just reiterate that everyone's financial situation is unique. It's important to have a long-term plan that's built around your personal goals and priorities. Planning is not one size fits all. Also that Rome was not built in a day. People should take a long-term view when it comes to planning. Don't let emotions derail your plan, and stay focused on your long-term strategy.
And I think that's such a great piece of advice. So Stacia, I just want to say it was such a pleasure having you with us today. You've shared some really helpful information to our listeners and helping them with their financial planning as they plan for their retirement. So just thank you again for joining us.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
And for our listeners, if you tuned into today's episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to the Senior Living Today podcast so that you never miss a new episode. And we will be back again in 2 weeks.